Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and in this video, I want to talk about HBO's His Dark Materials, which is in tandem with BBC. And I want to talk about episode 8 specifically, which is the finale of season 1. Now, just by that description alone, if you're joining me for the very first time, be warned that it's spoiler-filled. I assume that you have seen the episode, and so I'm going to talk about it from that perspective. Later on, I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of the books, which this is based off of by Phillip Pullman, so I'll call a double spoiler there. So where to begin? First off, I thought this was a fantastic season finale. One of the things that I've realized is that this series is very good at humanizing moments, which I think when it comes down to it, that's what the books were really about. And in particular, I thought the strength of this episode was Asriel and Lyra. They had a lot of great scenes. Initially, when we opened up, there was a lot of sort of tension, if you will. And then when he does try to open up to her and not necessarily be a father, I don't think that's what he was trying to do, but he was trying to at least make her understand what he was going after. And, ultimately he's doing this for the betterment of humanity. And so he wants her to understand that she's sort of part of that. And that's why they have that wonderful talk about dust. I thought really well done. Now, just simply brilliant. The other aspect that I thought was really well done was how Mrs. Coulter was portrayed in this episode. The way she's kind of working with the Magisterium to get them there, and then she studies what Asriel's work really is about, and she understands that it's about energy, but she doesn't quite know what it's going to lead to, and then she sees what it ends up happening. And I thought it was very interesting and very well done, her and Asriel's talk. This is kind of the first time that we're seeing them together, and oftentimes you wonder of how were they good for each other and things like that. And in that moment, they both, through the writing, through the acting, editing, and all the elements, they just really sell that there was a love there. One of the interesting parts was that Asriel never used the word love. He talks about her ambition, which I thought was a very detailed choice of words and a right choice of words, because I think, in a sense, their love is one of not necessarily convenience, but this idea that they have something to gain from each other. And what I thought was interesting was her response in saying that she really wants to be there for Lyra. And towards the end, Asriel keeps calling her the girl, her, all these things, whereas she's the one really using her name, which shows that there is a tenderness there towards Lyra, whereas Lord Asriel, as he says in the beginning, he doesn't want to get sentimental. And I think it comes from that place that if he gets too sentimental, he's not going to be able to accomplish his goal. And his goal is greater than himself, or so he certainly believes. And I appreciate kind of how he brought in that notion of his beliefs. And it really leaves Lyra questioning what is right and what is not. And so when Pantalaimon encourages her, let's essentially go all the way, I thought that was another powerful moment. As far as the action, there wasn't a lot of action in this episode. I thought we would get a bigger battle than we did, but in fact, it's not really about the battle. I had a lot of complaints last time that I thought Iorek and Yennefer was kind of a squandered action scene. In this episode, I didn't mind it because it really wasn't about that action. It was about what was happening with Roger and Lyra and Mrs. Coulter. That was the interesting stuff. And so, again, that's where they're finding strengths now, as with the bigger set pieces, like with last episode. That's where they run into problems. And so hopefully with season 2, they can fix that, because eventually they're going to need to expand into bigger set pieces. And I think if they can marry the big set pieces along with the human emotion that they're displaying, it'll be truly wonderful. The other plot line of this episode is the Will Perry storyline. And we certainly learn a little bit more in terms of, Whereas in the past episodes, we were told by Serafina that Lyra has a destiny to fulfill. Well, certainly Will does as well, and that's what we learn in this episode. And it's kind of a mysterious thing, obviously, but I loved Charles, aka Boreal, really digging into that guy and saying, you messed up. I gave you Thomas. You messed up. Essentially go fix this. And what's interesting is that he knows that there's some sort of legend, and how this suspicion is confirmed is obviously through the alethiometer back in his world, where Stanislav Grumman has a son. Now he knows that Stanislav Grumman does actually have a son; it's just not from that world. So it's interesting how this is all playing out, but I like it. You can see the parallelness of their paths. I think certainly by the way they ended this episode with both Will and Lyra entering into different worlds. We don't see the worlds that they enter into. They could be the same, they could be different, but nonetheless, they're on a trajectory towards something. So it's very interesting, and we get the introduction of the Tower of Angels and this sort of knife. So it's going to be interesting how that all plays out. Now, it's going to be a while before we see season 2, but I thought overall this season had a lot to work with, and while I love Nicole Kidman and Daniel Craig from the movie as Asriel and Mrs Coulter, I gotta say, now that we've gotten screen time with both Mrs Coulter and finally Lord Asriel to a larger extent, I am fully on board with them. And not that they were thinking this in any sense of the imagination, but it was fun to see Daphne Keane and James McAvoy on screen together because of the X-Men connection. I thought that was just a fun little kind of inside thing. They've never appeared on screen together, but Daphne Keane being in Logan and interacting with Charles Xavier, and then James McAvoy playing Charles Xavier, just not in that movie. So I thought that was pretty cool that we sort of, I don't know, it came to fruition that we got to see them interact. And yeah, boy, they're just magnetic. I thought that was truly a strength. Also, another kind of big moment of the episode for me was when Lyra saying goodbye to Iorek Byrnison, and I thought that was a very powerful moment. The only sort of downside then being when Panther Lyman's saying, we were always alone. I thought, no, there's plenty of people that love you, and so it's not necessarily true. I wish they kind of finessed that a little bit, where it's, even though we have people that love us, we have to continue forward, that type of thing, versus what we got. Because certainly the Egyptians love her, certainly Iorek loves her, Lee Scoresby, the witches. I can't say necessarily love her, but they certainly have an affinity towards making sure that she's kept safe and so forth. Thorold loves her in his own way. So there's plenty of people that love her, and so she's not alone. So I wish that's the only kind of nitpick of the episode that I do have. But I thought, as far as her saying goodbye to Iorek Byrnison, that was a very powerful moment. So a lot to love overall in this episode for me. I thought the season as a whole had a lot of strengths, and I'm very curious to know what you think. Now, I'm going to now go into sort of the book, so if you don't want to know spoilers and things like that, please tune out. But if you do, here we go. So overall, the crux of what this episode was about was tied with the books in terms of Lord Asriel using Roger and betraying, I don't know, Lyra, if you will, in that sense, and creating this pathway to a new world. That was in keeping with it. Certainly Lyra going through, that was in keeping with it, but the way it's executed, certainly none of the Asriel Lyra scenes were in the book, and certainly the Mrs Coulter and Asriel scene, that wasn't in the book either. So I thought that was a nice deviation, but in keeping with the themes of the book, and especially like I said, the talk with Lyra about the nature of dust and so forth. I thought that was really well done. That's there's a version of that is in the book, but the way it's executed here, it's different. and I appreciate how they executed it in this series. Also, you know, I don't think it's any secret that the Will Perry storyline, that by just inserting that into season 1 alone, is a deviation from the books, because we don't, you know, the second book, The Subtle Knife, begins by introducing us to Will, but I appreciate it because the second book, The Subtle Knife, essentially starts where we're about to take off. Granted, in the book you see him enter the world, so, you know, we've got like 5% of the book already done of that, but I appreciate it because, you know, you sort of needed a lot of backstory, and I don't think they could have handled that well with just an introductory episode in season 2. I'm glad they kind of layered it in now, and certainly you see things moving forward. You know that Charles needs this knife, and he knows that Will is the guy to provide it to him, and so that's set things in motion in a very unique way, which I appreciate. And yeah, I thought overall this season, while it deviated from the book here and there, overall it kept with the spirit of what the book was trying to go for, and certainly setting us up for that there's a larger war coming with the Authority, and that the Authority is the true evil, not even the Magisterium. That I thought was really well done. So overall, great success, and I'm glad that the season happened. And one of the things I'm very curious about, how did you react? You know, I know some of you that have been following me doing this have been huge fans of the book and have your own thoughts on it, and so I'm very curious. Also, I'm very curious if you stayed this long and you haven't read the books, what are your thoughts? You know, it's one thing to view it from the perspective of where you know things are headed, but from your perspective as like a first-time consumer of this story, I'm very curious to know what your thoughts and opinions are. Anyway, so please comment down below, hit me up on social media at Svitek, and let's converse, because ultimately that's why I do these videos, is not to just reveal my thoughts, but to engage and spark a conversation. And I should take the time to, because that was the last episode of season 1, to truly thank you for going on this journey with me. I truly appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun discussing the show with you, and I can't wait to join for season 2.